I think we're pretty confident saying like you grew up after the internet or before the internet.
Right.
I think we're going to have before AI and after AI. This could possibly be a moment of Zen, but the moment of Zen may be the way the Gazelle looks when it realizes the cheetah's got it.
That's right.
So I think with open source, I've always thought it's great to be able to fine tune your own model. And so that to me is a blessing and a curse because it seems very analogous to this balkanization of the internet where you have a vacuum or a bubble. Will this technology help humans live happier lives? I think for sure when it comes to health. If your goal is to get rid of scarcity, I wonder how even open source would democratize the power. The biggest fork in the road that I've been keeping an eye on is whether or not things will become open source or closed.
Right.
If we continue to go open source, that's one path, very distributed and democratized, a very different path. And then the other one is one grand seeing eye.
I have concluded in my own mind, this doesn't mean it's going to be true, but that open source is going to win. And the reason why. Hey everyone, welcome to Love Conquers Fear, the podcast where I'm putting it all out there on the line to do absolutely everything I can to help make sure that humanity makes it to the age of abundance for all. And this is the first time that the podcast has been on the road. And I cannot think of a better person to kick this off than one of my very, very good friends, Ethan Holland. We've known each other for a long time. And we're really going to dive into a lot today on the AI front. He's been chronicling the rise of AI and what it means for us societally and all the tools every week since the launch of ChatGPT. And he's now up to episode, I think, 96. And so we're going to get into all that. But first, I just want to welcome Ethan. And Ethan, tell us about where we're at. We're doing an actual fireside chat and it's August.
That's right. So we are on the Delmarva Peninsula, which is where I live, which is Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia, just east of DC. It's a pretty rural place to be having a tech conversation, but I think it's
a beautiful place.
Pretty conducive. So we're on the bay next to Assateague Island near Ocean City, Maryland.
Yeah, this is absolutely gorgeous. And it's a good metaphor for humanity, because you and I have been having, some really deep conversations actually since I arrived. And it's really such an honor to be here. And I just want to start out with just thanking you so much for our friendship. I mean, gosh, I think it's been over 20 years now, right?
Yeah, almost 30. We're in that. Probably
oh my gosh. Okay.
25.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. All right. So let's start out with a bit about you. Tell us, how did you grow up? Tell us about your parents, like your big aspirations growing up, how you got to this moment of caring so much about AI.
Sure. And interrupt me if I'm taking too long because I want to make sure we keep on track. But so I was raised here on this peninsula, very rural area. And, I think I learned to be curious in college. So I was what I'd call a jellyfish in high school, where I just floated around and absorbed, and I didn't have a lot of causality for myself. And then I went to Swarthmore College outside of Philly, and I had some great professors, and I learned to get curious. And I think once you get curious, it's hard to turn it off.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just lucky to be at the same time as the internet, probably a little bit like you. Our generation was in a good spot. So we got to kind of grow at the same pace as the internet.
We're the last generation that will remember life before the internet.
Right. So I think, how I got here from there was, I don't know how much we want to talk about how I met you, but that is
Let's
probably,
talk about it. Yeah.
probably a good segue.
Let's first talk about you and your childhood and.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm an only child. I was very fortunate. So I think I've carried that with me as something that I'm self-conscious about, being my own person. So I had a very successful dad who was a strong personality in a small town environment. He was a judge, and my mom went to Harvard. So here I am in Milford, Delaware. And from fourth grade till when I was a senior in high school, my mom commuted to Boston. She left every Sunday and came back on Thursdays and went to grad school. And my dad was a judge and was friends with Ginsburg and Scalia and all these people So I had to kind of figure out who I was. So I think
And he became a Supreme Court judge.
he was on the Delaware Supreme Court, and that certainly informs who I am now, is sort of deciding, well, what do I bring to the table and who am I? And along the way, I discovered I just love emerging technology, and I'm pretty good at it.
Yeah, you're very good at it.
So I think, so I have a big shadow and a lot of shoes to fill, and I think I carry that with me. So my childhood, in that sense, being in a rural area, I was not, I'm not in next door. I'm not in, like, if you've read Outliers, I didn't have a Unix machine in my high school like Bill Gates or something,
All right.
So I was in this rural area, so I didn't get exposed to that sort of thing until college. And then we did have a Unix machine in college.
Right.
We had all these resources, and that was where I really learned how much I loved it.
Yeah. My internet game in college, which I started in 1990, it was running on a Solaris workstation, on Unix.
Yeah.
And actually, I got kicked out of the school because it would consume all the resources, almost like a parasite. Because my game became very popular.
It's a compliment in a
But
way.
it was in a way, but it was also hard to get kicked out of the CS lab. I was not a CS student. And then the game, like, parasitically went to other servers until finally a company picked it up as the sponsor. They're like one of the early web hosting companies.
Wow.
And but it apparently by 92 it was the most popular game on the internet. But it all started with Unix and C.
Yeah, we had Sun Microsystems Unix
Yep.
machines,
Yep.
and we had those Next boxes. Do you remember Next?
I do remember that.
Where-
We had those in the CS lab too. Again, I was not a CS student. I was an MIS student, but I spent most of my time in the CS lab.
Well, it's probably a good thing to point out, is I was an English major. So I was an English major, and then I got so into computers that I would basically Friday nights, if I was drinking a 6-pack, I'd be in the computer lab. I wasn't at a party. I was doing whatever on the Unix machines.
Yeah.
And I was not a computer science person either.
Right. Yeah, because you were an English major, right?
Right.
Yeah. What made you decide to be an English major? Like, what was my mom, by the way, we didn't talk about this, but my mom, Brenda, she was a dual major between English and mathematics, and her true love actually was English, like the classics. And she just absolutely loved it.
I liked, obviously, just learning it through literature and immersing myself. I started out as a bio major, and then I just kept signing up for English courses, and I had really good professors. So I was actually a Black Studies concentrator. So a lot of Harlem Renaissance poetry and things like that. And just learning about the world through reading was fantastic. And I stuck with it, almost kind of just made its own path. It wasn't something where I went into school saying, this is what I want to do. It's just what I ended up taking.
And in a way, you were taking a very humanitarian approach to it, because you were digging into layers of history,
Right.
Through the Black American experience early on.
And that's very Swarthmore, because Swarthmore, being liberal arts,
Yeah.
very small school.
Yeah.
I don't even think you can declare your major till junior year.
Okay.
So you're meant to be figuring
Yeah.
it out at school.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Very cool. And then that passion for technology, just kind of walk me through that, because I know, you got an early start in e-commerce, and you and I were both in the very early days of that renaissance. And now there's a whole new birth of AI meeting e-commerce. We'll get into that later on. But you and I originally met, I think, at a shop.org conference.
Correct.
Yeah.
In Las Vegas. So we met, so to start with how I got into to that world, partially was through English reading. So I read Neuromancer as part of my curriculum. A lot of great science
One of my
fiction.
favorite books, actually.
Ursula Le Guin, Left Hand of Darkness, all these really great sci-fi, fantasy type books I was reading. So that opened my mind to thinking about humanity and technology. And then I had a guy on my hall, was named Justin Hall, and this was 1993. He was the first blogger ever.
Okay.
And so you can Wikipedia him. He's often considered the father of blogging, personal publishing.
Yeah. What's his name again?
Justin Hall.
Justin Hall.
He had a website called links.net
Okay.
that was very similar to Yahoo, because back then you
Yeah.
could literally document the whole internet and just.
I had to have run across it because I was that early.
So he was a oversharer,
Yeah.
but in particular, he took a semester off and he went to help found Wired magazine. And this is before Federated Media, before banner ads and
Yeah.
John Battelle. This was really at the beginning of
Yeah.
publishing online.
I was one of their first subscribers. I imagine you were reading it early on too. Yeah.
So he
Bruce Sterling and all.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
Bruce Spimes. He's a Texas guy, right? Bruce.
Bruce would give the single best keynote at South by Southwest.
Yep.
One of the things, if you're a Bruce Sterling fan, is he does a State of the World with my friend John Lipkowski every year on the well. And so it's a really fun read. It's a little bit snarky because Bruce is definitely a strong satirist, and he's not so positive on humanity like I am, but he's genius. The most intimidating dinner I ever had was with Bruce Sterling, because I put him on this pedestal of, one of my favorite sci-fi authors. And he didn't disappoint. He definitely is much, much smarter than me. I mean, his polymath like knowledge was just kind of off the charts.
Well, so going back to the well, Justin's mentor was Howard Rheingold,
Okay.
who is a big well guy, all the San Francisco ethos and the Grateful Dead and all the Haight-Ashbury stuff. So that is a great way to introduce Justin's influence on me. Justin came by my dorm one day and said, you have to check out this thing called the internet. And his pitch was, his father committed suicide. And I think he was in high school at the time when his father died. And so here we are, sophomore in college. And he said, look, I have been alone with this very hard journey of losing my father. And I've never been able to find anyone like me. And there's this new thing called the internet. And I found 10 people in this community online. I don't know if it was Gopher or Telnet or what he was using back then.
Yeah, it may have been Usenet.
Some sort of, Usenet.
Yeah, Usenet was like the original message board.
But he found people like him. And he was like, this is going to change the world, because people who feel lonely, and me coming from Delmarva, a very rural area, I think that's a normal feeling. People are a little isolated and you can't find your tribe. He was like, look, everyone's going to be able to find their tribe.
All right.
Now, the irony is I don't think he predicted the balkanization it would cause
Right.
all these tribes.
Right.
But he was looking at it as the optimal, utopian version of the internet.
Right.
And so he made it his calling to teach people HTML.
Right.
And to teach them how to blog, how to use Fetch or FTP, and or just you do it right in the you could do the code on the server if you want.
My game was only accessible via Telnet.
So he really broke the ice for me and showed me this bigger picture of why the internet was good and exciting. And then from there, he taught me the tools through HTML and things, how to buy a domain, all that, ICANN, all those things we don't know about anymore.
Right. Right.
And so he was a huge influence on me. And so I started blogging too.
Yeah.
And
what year was that?
This is 93. I think I was blogging in 94.
Okay. Yeah. Early.
And at that point, there's not a blog. There was no WordPress. You just wrote the HTML and uploaded it.
I wonder if he ever played my game, because I started my game. It was called Renegade Outpost, and I started in 1990.
He probably did. Now, the difference between him and I, we had a very interesting path. He overshared to the point that I want to speak for him, but maybe he got addicted to it. But he shared everything. And so that open kimono approach was so early. The internet wasn't as toxic as it is now. So as he grew and became more and more open, and the internet got more and more people, suddenly other people were oversharing. He wasn't the only blogger.
Right. Right.
And so he actually withdrew. And his solution was to stop, because like anyone who overshares or gets addicted, in that sort of sense, it was ruining his authentic moments with his friends and family. So he withdrew. And for me, I was a kid and I was drinking, and I just figured to myself, maybe I don't need to say everything
right
now.
Right.
But he did give me that introduction that led me to, just when I graduated, going into e-commerce.
Right.
So it was not hard to, it was pretty easy when you've already kind of grown up with the internet, and a legacy business has not. So my first job was at a catalog company, which is when I met you.
Yeah.
I just graduated and they wanted to put their catalog online.
Yeah.
So taking print and turning it into e-commerce was my first job.
And that was Burpee.
That was Burpee Seeds.
Burpee Seeds, which had been around since 1800s.
Yep. They started mail order chickens.
Okay. I didn't know that. I just thought they started with the
chickens. And I think the seed was seed to feed the chickens.
Right.
And then evolved to flowers and vegetables.
I never realized the Burpee, a plant company, started with, or seed company, started with chickens.
They did a lot of cool things.
There's a good metaphor. Which came first, the chicken or the egg, or in this case, the seed.
The chicken came first. And they innovated with some really neat things. So there was a lot of storytelling opportunities where, for example, yellow corn was not yellow. They bred it to look yellow because
Right.
people couldn't afford butter,
Okay.
and things like that. And victory gardens during World War II, it was a big part of their DNA.
Right. Right.
But the funny thing in hindsight is they did not believe anyone would ever want to buy anything online
Right.
because you need to hold the catalog,
Yeah.
which I think our generation would remember the J. Crew catalog, or
Yeah. Sure.
page through it. You
Oh
circle
yeah.
what you want, give it to your
Absolutely.
parents or whatever.
Yeah.
So the big win for them was when they realized there's no printing costs. You can put more than one picture for each product, and you can make a longer description.
Right. Right.
Then they started realizing, oh, this is kind of fun.
Right. Right. So one of the stories that we were talking about over dinner last night with regards to Burpee was one of my favorite stories about the whole history of Bazaarvoice, which you were always a big fan of the company, and we pioneered customer reviews in e-commerce sites. When we started, there were only 3 retailers in the entire United States who had customer reviews. That was just 2005. That was 2 years before the iPhone launched. Facebook was closed to the public. It was just a handful of schools. There was no Snapchat, no Twitter, no TikTok, et cetera. So there was a social media wave about to hit. But early on, there were a lot of retailers and brands that were really sensitive about it. And Burpee actually was one of those. So here you are, like, with this background of being an early tech pioneer and adopter, beginning of Wired magazine and everything else. And I remember your boss was particularly hard on me at the beginning. He became a big fan later on, but maybe we should just tell that story. I'd love for you to tell it from your lens.
Sure.
Because I'll tell you my version from my lens.
So my lens was so we used Coremetrics, which was your first company, or at least the first I worked with,
Yeah.
for all the analytics, and I was brand new. So a good segue to just how brand new I was
Right.
I didn't realize that salespeople had an ulterior motive. So the same week I met you in Las Vegas at
Yeah.
shop.org, I flew out for it was my first conference, first time in Vegas. I think I was in the Venetian for 6 days by myself. So it was like my
All right. You're
fire
like, what
hose,
is going on?
fire hose in Vegas. And all these people wanted to take me out to dinner.
Right.
And I thought it was amazing. So like
Right.
Yahoo at the time
Right.
was like the big one. And we went out to dinner, and then they had a suite at like
Not
Night
dinner,
Barrel.
but like the
Yeah,
nicest
great
restaurant. Yeah.
things. And I just thought, wow, these people are my people.
Right.
And then of course,
All right.
at the end of the night, they're thinking like, well, when are we going to do a deal or something?
Right.
And
Right.
I'm like, what's next? Where are we headed?
Right. Where are we going? Right.
So I was a little naive, and I didn't realize that it was a transactional relationship. And obviously, I think that's what made you stand out, because you were not transactional. But when I met you, and we were talking about reviews, it just made sense, because I was all about information wants to be free, be transparent. You want to show, if you're great,
Yeah.
showcase it, because people believe
Totally.
they're friends.
Yeah.
So I think in hindsight, all these things are very intuitive.
Right. And
But
by the way, just so you know, because you may not know this, like, we named Bazaarvoice, Brant Barden and I, my co-founder, after chapter 4 of the Clue Train Manifesto, which that chapter, that book was written in 1999, and that chapter was called Markets Are Conversations. So we're trying to symbolize that word of mouth was always the most important, because it's authentic, right? It wasn't marketing. It was me telling you about a book I just read. We were talking about a lot of books last night. And that's going to have a lot more impact on you than an ad. And we're trying to tell the retail market and the brands is like, your customers are doing this all the time. They're talking whether you like it or not, and you should like it because it's driving your sales.
Well, I think when you're young, and when I was young, you don't realize the stakes.
Right.
So in my mind, I just thought it very simple. Burpee's an old company. They're beloved. They've got the best seeds, the best product. Like, we have a great customer base. This will just be a mirror and shine the light on just how much love our customers have. And I think in hindsight, the parts that's naive is when you've built a big house, you don't want to mess it up.
Right.
So that conservatism of not wanting to, what if someone says something bad? Like, people thought I was being naive.
Right.
Because all it takes is one bad apple to kind of poison the well, so to speak.
Right.
And
well, that's the fear. It's actually usually not the case, but yes, that is the old story.
That was the fear at the time.
Yeah.
And so I came in pretty eager beaver idealist, coming in saying we need to have reviews, not expecting any problem.
Bushwhacker. You're like,
I'd like-
didn't you all grow up like I did?
I love it with a slam dunk. And so I brought you into, I got us you on the phone because I met you in Vegas. I'm like, I come back and I'm like, guys, you need to meet my friend Brett and hear about this new company. And I think at the time you had like Petco and maybe Golfsmith
And
and
CompUSA.
CompUSA,
Yeah,
but it was like 5, I think.
Maybe we had
People.
5 customers. Yeah, I can't remember how many we had, but
And maybe that would be the
not that
segue to you. You can explain how the call went when you got on.
yeah. So I mean, on the call, your boss got really animated and started to yell at me, and I put the phone on mute on my side. This was pre like Zoom or any of this stuff, and I told the other people in the room, I said, "Man, this airplane is going down hard, and we are going to crash and burn in flames," you know. And then I got the idea. I was like, "Oh my gosh, okay, I know what to say." And they're like, "What are you gonna say?" And I'm like, "Just watch. This will be interesting. See what happens." So I took it off mute and I said, "Don," I was like, "Do you know anything about kryptonite bike locks?" And he's like, "I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, what is this kryptonite thing?" And I said, "Well, if you go and search it on Google, um, in the top 3 organic search results, what's called SEO, you'll find that there's a YouTube video showing how to pick a kryptonite bike lock with a big pin." And he's like, okay, that's interesting. And I said, "Look, respectfully, Burpee has a lot at stake. It's an old brand. And do you want to be the next kryptonite bike lock, or do you want to know when you're having a problem like that?" And then I put it on mute. And there was a long pause. I mean, I don't know what it felt like on your side, but it was like, felt like a very long minute on my side. And then he said, "Damn it, we'll do it." Right. And that's how Burpee became a customer. And then what happened after that?
I was in the room, so I think he was at his desk and I was here and I knew about the kryptonite bike lock thing and I was like, okay, here we go. It was a similar thing and I think he looked at me and I looked at him and he liked me. He ended up being in my wedding, so he
Yeah.
was a good dude.
No, he ended up being a huge champion.
And he I remember who was the guy from Bain who did the net promoter score? Is it Fred?
Fred Reichheld.
Fred
Yeah.
Reichheld. And he
Yeah, it
was
was called The Ultimate Question was the name of his book.
And so you brought this up when we were talking yesterday about detractors and evangelists, and there's like these 4 quadrants, I
Net
think
promoters.
he had of the net promoters. And that is a case study of what happened with me and Don, because we launched a product. It was one of our first physical products that year called the Burpee Seed Starting Kit.
Right.
And that was meant to just kind of help people, because seed starting is a very niche thing and it's difficult.
Right.
Most people would just buy a plant at a nursery. You go buy a tomato plant.
Right.
So the people that grow things from seeds are another level.
Right.
So to try to make that more accessible, we had this seed starting kit that would hopefully set and forget it on your windowsill.
Right.
And that was our first product with ratings and reviews. And it got creamed.
Right.
And it had all sorts of problems. And what was really fun to watch was how much Burpee listened. And then we released the Seed Starter 2.
Yeah.
It was our best-selling product and 5 stars. And we basically were very honest and said, look, thank you for telling us about our product. And look what we did.
Right.
Thanks to you, it is now the best seed starting kit you could possibly get.
Right. Right.
And I think that was probably from your point of view, a common story of some clients.
Not at that point in time. It became more common, but those early case studies, we're sitting in front of a fire, like become fire starters for a movement. Because really when Brant and I started Bazaarvoice, what was in our hearts and the reason that we were so passionate about it from the beginning was it actually was a power of the people movement. We wanted people to go back to the humanity of realizing that word of mouth was the most powerful form of marketing. One of the most beautiful things about human beings is that we're wired actually to help each other and to suggest things that we think each other will enjoy. And, it's not like we're looking at our watch and thinking, wow, I just wasted 10 minutes talking about my favorite movie. Like we're trying to create connection that way because we live in a physical world and we're having this physical experience and we want each other to have a great experience.
It is interesting because it was before Facebook, that era the word community was used a lot next to ratings and reviews. It was like your
Right.
customer community because there was no feed or algorithms. People still went to websites
Yeah.
as destinations, and then these communities would be there and people would get to know each other, and you had a lot of trust because you'd hear the person. People would share their photos too. We did a lot of that
Yeah.
at Burpee
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
gardening, you want to show off your big tomatoes and stuff. So
Right.
our community was, and because of Bazaarvoice, it was really fun, and it was a huge win. And Don, I'm happy you had that experience with Don. Yeah, he became a big evangelist.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually in my career, I can tell you that the biggest detractors initially that you turned into, you turn their skepticism in a way through actual facts and experience into a promoter, they become the biggest net promoters because the skeptics can sell everybody else, because they've already gone in thinking this is going to fail. And I was surprised that it didn't. But I really owe a lot to, you making that bet on me to bring me in there in the first place. Could have turned out very differently. And Don for taking the risk. And it's kind of cool that the product that launched was, in a way, it's Burpee's kryptonite lock.
True, that's a good
And
point.
and then it turned.
Yeah. Well, I think the other really big revelation was that you need a few bad reviews
Hmm.
to lift up the good ones.
Yes.
And so they're actually net positive if you have a couple bad ones because people are going to get a dud. It's okay.
Right. Because it's authenticity.
Yeah.
It's if it was all positive, we don't live in a world where everything's positive.
And not every criticism is applicable to every customer. So it
That's
doesn't
right.
even matter sometimes.
That's exactly right.
Like cheap sunglasses are meant to be cheap.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very cool. So, all right. So Burpee, let's close out that chapter. It's a great chapter. And I know you had many other chapters and you were a real pioneer in e-commerce, and we could talk about that all day long. I want to go to the thematic of this podcast, but right before I go to that, I just want to say one thing. Like on social media and in real life, I can tell you're one of the best dads I know.
Oh, thank
Like,
you.
it's unbelievable how great you are with your daughters, and how amazing they are at dance and everything else. So I just want to make sure that's said because we didn't talk about family, but like part of what I love about you is you're an amazing human being, not just an amazing business leader and AI forecaster, et cetera.
Well, likewise, and you've always had faith in me, which is something I think, for anyone who knows you who's watching this podcast, Brett is a tremendously successful person, and he's liked me since day one. And it's never been about my company or what I can offer. It's always been a genuine, authentic relationship, and that's very special to me.
Yeah,
And the
likewise.
fact that you've always rooted for me, it means the world. So
Well,
that's who I've
likewise.
been.
That goes. That's what a true friendship's all about.
You.
And so with the book I'm writing, which again is called Love Conquers Fear, Humanity, AI, and the Age of Abundance for All. And this podcast is a, predecessor to it. I really want to know if, first of all, you agree with me that within, our lifetimes that we can humanity can manifest an age of abundance for all.
Well, one thing I'll say to begin is that I am laser focused on this topic.
Yep.
So when ChatGPT came out, it was the first time since Justin Hall came to my room and said the internet is going to change everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I was lucky enough to live through it and watch it. I'll actually blow off mobile, even though that's a pretty big part of the arc as well.
Yeah.
Just the internet itself, which led to all these other things, including mobile.
Mobile, social media,
All that
lots of
stuff.
things.
I think this is it. And so when I first saw GPT, I didn't see GPT. I saw what I consider multimodality.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a spark. So I think whether it's embodied robots or all the things we now talk about, I immediately woke up and thought, okay, this is round two.
Right.
So I'm 51 years old now. And when I was in my 20s, I got to watch the internet. And I knew I was pretty good at it. I'm not usually too much of a toot my own horn type of person, but I definitely saw where the puck was going with the internet. And I thought, you know what?
You definitely saw where the puck.
I had just been
doubt.
given a wonderful gift of Emerson, who I had not read before, but Emerson, Self-Reliance, said that the eye is placed in front of a particular ray of light, so it should testify about that ray. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. Like if I have a gift, I need to use it. And this is what I love. So not only is it sort of, it was just something that woke me up immediately to say, this is your chance to really dive in and not be embarrassed about being a little foolish and putting your stake down. And so let's go.
Right.
And so in September, whenever it opened it, whatever in November it was, whenever it came out, ChatGPT.
It was November 30th, 2022.
November 30th, right? So I sat on it and was very aware of it. And then in January, I posted to Facebook, this is a line, it's like a ring in the tree, where we will look back on this just like we did the internet, or before the internet. I think we're pretty confident saying like, you grew up after the internet or before the internet.
Right.
I think we're going to have before AI and after AI.
For sure.
So I wrote in my,
which I would say is much bigger than pre-internet.
much bigger.
Yeah.
And so we'll get to that next. So I wrote a post. I said, this could possibly be a moment of Zen, but the moment of Zen may be the way the gazelle looks when it realizes the cheetah's got it.
That's right. That was supposed, I was trying to remember what it was. It was that. And it really sat with me.
Because you see that look in its eyes. If you've ever watched a cheetah get taken down or take down a gazelle, the gazelle finally just like, all right.
Right.
Here we are.
It finally succumbs. Right.
So that was what I wrote. And I felt I made it public. I didn't do that in the past very much.
Right.
And so I decided I would really live. So I turned all my Facebook posts to public, my Instagram. I never was like that. And I decided I'm going to put it in writing and I'm going to commit.
Right.
So that's step one. And then I became rabid about it, which we can talk about later. But my answer about, I think your question is, do I agree that humanity can make it?
Right.
That's question one?
Yeah. To the age of abundance for all.
To the age of abundance.
And by the way, for all, I mean, one of the people I'm covering in my book is this guy Calibu, who is from Chad, which I knew nothing about Chad, but it's 187 out of 189 on the Human Development Index. Their GDP per person is $660 versus ours around 85,000 in the US. And if we can create an oasis in Chad through the rise of AI, robots, et cetera, all the clean water supply, energy they need, then we can create an oasis anywhere. So I kind of start with that in the book, because if we can do it in Chad, that means humanity is going to be really pretty incredible.
Well, I think the crux of this first question is this in our lifetime? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the biggest fork in the road that I've been keeping an eye on is whether or not things will become open source or closed.
Right.
And so either one of those are so different.
Right.
And just in the past few months, we've seen the chatter be that America is becoming more closed.
Right.
So, is Meta going to release the next one as open source? Is Grok really open source anymore?
Right.
And the Chinese models, I think 4 of the top 5 open source models are now Chinese.
Yes.
And so if we continue to go open source, that's one path, very distributed and democratized, a very different path. And then the other one is, I think probably at the moment, more scary to me, this idea of one grand closed frontier model that, it's like in Camazotz, what was the name in Wrinkle in Time? The bad computer, it's a computer, right? I forget the details, but I don't want to be Camazotz, right? Or one grand seeing eye.
Right.
So I think the idea of it being in our lifetime is, I don't know. I'd probably say I'm not optimistic I'm 51. Maybe for our kids, possibly, but the way I see it playing out is more in these incremental steps. So I remember the Apple Newton, which was a dud.
Yep. I remember.
But yet the Kindle is like, and the iPad are successes.
Yeah.
And so the things that came together.
Before even the Newton, by the way, there was the Go, which
I didn't have.
Which there was a great nonfiction book written by the founder of that, and about how it crashed and burned. But it was a really beautiful, like, entrepreneurial read, because it took you through the whole thing where you had the cardboard box that you threw on the table. I think Kleiner Perkins backed it, and imagine this. And so there were other predecessors outside of Newton.
Well, for me, the Newton was a big lesson in the sum and the parts. I think there's an analogy to that with AI. So with the Newton, we didn't have digital rights management. We didn't really have Wi-Fi, I don't think, when it first came out. You had to plug your
I don't think so. Yeah.
So, having an infrastructure.
Yeah.
DRM, distribution, content syndication, all that sort of stuff. Once those parts came together into the sum, now we
Right.
have a product.
Right.
And with AI, I think, we have medical advances, which will be fantastic.
Yeah.
So just on their own, the ability to read an X-ray better will be wonderful.
Yeah.
Or the ability to predict the flood or, the weather.
Right.
But I think currently these best in class products
Hmm.
are from different companies.
Right.
And anytime I see that competition, I don't necessarily see anything utopian because that's sort of resource scarcity as opposed to this idea of a non-resource dependent humanity.
Right.
So the idea of capitalism is so rooted into the model right
Right.
now,
Right. Right.
I don't see an
Yeah.
exit yet.
Can I push you on that a little bit?
Yeah.
Because for me, I was trying to figure that out, and I have concluded in my own mind. This doesn't mean it's going to be true, but that open source is going to win. And the reason why is it was February 21st of this year that President Trump announced the Stargate project, which is 500 billion of funding. He announced that alongside Mayoshi Son, Sam Altman, and Larry Ellison. And to put that into context, inflation adjusted, that is more money, inflation adjusted, than we spent on the space race versus the Russians or on the Manhattan Project versus the Nazis. And that amount of money was overshadowed the day before. So you can't even script this. February 20th is when DeepSeek announced the R1 model. And it took until the next week for the market to realize that R1 was vastly, vastly more powerful as an open source model than GPT-4 was, which if you go back in time, it was March of 2023 that GPT-4 came out and the moratorium call happened that 37,000 researchers in AI signed, including Elon Musk, saying, shut it down until we get a handle on AI safety, like give us 6 months to figure that out. And of course, we're so far past the GPT-4 moment. And there's multiple ways to look at that with the Chinese. Like, is this a provocation or is this an olive branch? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what was going on in their mind, but it is open source. And what it told me in that moment is that open source will win because the weights can be either stolen, borrowed, whatever you say. So the weights from OpenAI were taken by R1, by DeepSeek, to create a model that, you can't really believe what the government says on this, but the Chinese government said it only cost, well, DeepSeek, the company, said it only cost $16 million to develop this thing. So that means that the frontier models definitely have a role. I mean, like OpenAI is already at 12 billion of AR, okay? 2 years, I think 9 months now after the launch of GPT, of ChatGPT. And there's never been a company that's grown faster than that in history. Salesforce.com took 18 years to get to 10 billion of AR. ServiceNow took 21 years to get to 10 billion of AR, right? ChatGPT got there in 2.5 years. Anthropic has grown, I think, 900 million of AR to 5 billion in the last 10 months. I mean, which like stunning. The pace is stunning. So the frontier models are going to have a big role and they'll be out in front. But one of the big learnings for me, at least in this AI arms race, which we've never seen anything like this in human history, in terms of the amount of money and time, is that the weights can be borrowed. And therefore, like, Yuzu, our youngest daughter, she's running 5 open source models on her home computer. And they are vastly more powerful than GPT-4 was. And her home computer is a pretty powerful computer, but it's not as powerful as one of the NVIDIA digits boxes, which can each run a 200 billion parameter model. And you can chain those together. So you could actually have 5 of those, running, 1,000 gig parameter or 1,000 billion parameter model. So at least to me, that tells me that open source is going to win and that this really is going to be like electricity for the world and not just controlled in the hands of the few.
So I think with open source, I would look at what we've learned from the internet
Yeah.
with the balkanization.
Yes.
And I do like the
It
idea.
has been balkanized,
I like and that's a term I stole from somebody, but I like it
but
'cause
it's a great term.
it's a good term.
Right.
But I've always thought it's great to be able to fine tune your own model.
Yeah.
So if you have an open source model, I could make it rated G friendly for kids. I could make it talk like a sailor or a pirate.
Right.
I could have whatever a raunchy model, but I can control its politics, whatever I want.
Right. Right.
And so that to me is a blessing and a curse because it seems very analogous to this balkanization of the internet where
Right.
you have a vacuum or a bubble.
Right.
So I think I like the open source piece. I always would assume there's a stronger model that the people don't have, whether it's Frontier or just a better CPU or more compute.
Right.
So I think that would be something I'd love to hear your thoughts about. There's two pieces before I switch back to you. One is just will this technology help humans live happier lives? I think
Right.
for sure when it comes to health,
Right.
or my ability to, if I want to look up how to start a limited liability corporation, I can ask GPT-5 and it's going to tell me as well as a consultant at this point.
Right.
So I think the ability for anyone, just like the kid in rural Alabama can now watch an MIT physics lecture on YouTube.
Right.
We all have a PhD in our pocket. That's a big deal
A
for
big
helping
deal.
people have agency.
Right.
I think the converse piece would be there's always a stronger model that
Mhm.
if your goal is to get rid of scarcity, I wonder how even open source would democratize the power, so
Right.
to speak.
Right.
Because, I'm
Yeah.
limited to whatever device I have, if any,
Right. Right.
you know.
No, it's a very good question, and part of my thesis and the reason the book and the podcast, are named Love Conquers Fear, is that the biggest challenge we have is ourselves. And what I mean by that is that because of the way we've evolved, we are locked into a bit of a scarcity, fear-based mindset, which sometimes tends to be zero sum. There's the reason Stargate is getting that amount of funding, make no mistake about it, is that it's the same thing like the quantum computing race, where we're like, if the Chinese get AGI before us, we lose. And the Chinese are like, if we get AGI, if we, the US, get AGI before them, they lose. And, we're a world of 8.2 billion humans. And at one point, collectively, we have to wake up. And there are moments in time where we did wake up. We woke up when it came to nuclear weapons. It got really close with the Cuban Missile Crisis, a little bit too close for comfort. Could have been all over then. It was one person standing in the way of that. It got close with smallpox. And there was a point in human history that most people don't talk about or learn about, 50 to 70,000 years ago, where we were down to anywhere from 800 to a couple of thousand humans. There's no way to know for sure, but the genealogical records show that we almost were extinguished during the Ice Age. And the theory is that a supervolcano came on top of the Ice Age and blanketed the Earth. And it was such tough conditions that could have been the end of the human experiment, right? That could have been it. And instead, we pulled together and collaborated and survived. And so the part of what gives me faith in humanity is that our core nature is good, but there's lots of things constantly challenging that core nature. I mean, I'm very clear-eyed on social media as an algorithmic manipulation, like trying to goal seek to our basest fears. Enragement equals engagement equals selling more ads. Meta pulled in $45 billion of profit last quarter. Mark Zuckerberg has announced he is spending hundreds of billions of dollars on a Manhattan-sized data center dedicated to AI, but at least he's doing it in open source.
Right.
At least Llama is open source, and it's a challenger to the models. And so it's a yin and yang thing, right? And then, of course, the media itself, which I'm a big fan of the free press. Like, this is not a critique of the free press, but it's just a critique of the business model, is also goal seeking to our most primitive fears. And that's why they're not going to push to you and me the latest climate change possible cure, or latest possible cancer cure. they are going to push to us the latest crazy thing that some politician said that we should all be pissed off about. And so if you get programmed all the time, you just assume it's a dystopia. And the reality is, in a world of 8.2 billion humans, there's always something bad happening every day, but there's also constantly many, many, many more acts of love and beauty and connection, like what we're doing here, happening every single day.
Well, you said two things that reminded me. So the Bay of Pigs and the Cuban Missile Crisis was a big, big formative moment for me when I watched. I wish I knew who was on the panel, but it was the main players were all invited back at some anniversary. So I don't know if it's 20 years later or what. But
Right.
it was a PBS panel
Okay.
from all the people who were involved,
Right.
and they all sat at a table and confessed that they all were scared of the other person and just didn't want to make a mistake because they thought they were going to lose.
Right.
So it's the ultimate, prisoner's dilemma, or whatever you want to call it, game
Prisoner's dilemma.
gone mad.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Because when they got to confess later, it was like, yeah, I had no desire to hurt you. I didn't even know you.
Right.
I had no ill will to you. I thought you hated me.
Right.
And it was, as a kid, I don't know how old I was when I saw this, but it was part of my journey as an individual that when I saw that, I thought, wow,
Right.
that's worth remembering, because why can't we just hit pause and have everyone come back 20 years later, like on everything?
Right.
Because, we go back to Japan now, we go to Vietnam now. You always go back as a tourist to Germany,
Right.
and everyone's friends. Why can't we just hit the pause button and skip to the friends part?
And what would it take for us to skip to the friends part? I mean, one thing I do answer, because you asked me this question, so I don't want to be perceived as dodging it, because I'm not dodging at all. Like, you asked me about the energy problem, and part of my thesis in terms of us getting to the age of abundance for all is that, similar to DeepMind with AlphaFold and now AlphaFold 2, solving the protein folding problem. And they've come out with other versions of alpha this and alpha that, which are really incredible. We are going to have a dramatic acceleration in material science. And I think that the energy that we need is constantly staring at us in the sky every waking hour. And that, of course, is the sun. And so, we just need the material science breakthrough where solar is indisputably the champion. And actually, if you look at the charts, it's already happening. And so, you being a longtime technologist, you saw the beginning of crappy modems and crappy printers and crappy computers and crappy bandwidth, all that stuff. You can kind of just see that we're going to have a world of unlimited, nearly unlimited energy from the sun.
Well, one thing that you also made me think of is, what I believe is one thing, but there's also what the market believes and a lot of things like that. So going back to my naive young self at Burpee, when I just walked in with an idealistic principle, one theme I've noticed is that businesses protect themselves.
Right.
And they only invest, and people do as well. The market just,
That's true.
You want to do what's going to be fruit, bring fruit. And so I wrote in my most recent newsletter, one of the most surreal things I'm witnessing is the convergence of the hyperbolic emotional things people are saying with the investment at the same time. So, Meta got a lot of press for offering 100 million, 200 million pay packages to try to poach OpenAI and other employees. But what struck me as possibly even more powerful is I believe the rumor is 10 OpenAI employees turned down $100 million.
Right.
So when someone's willing to fund $500 billion in a data center, that's different than me at a bar with 2 beers being like, hey, this is going to change the world.
Right.
Like, someone's giving real money.
Yes, real money. And it may seem completely insane to someone watching this that Meta would offer an AI engineer $100 million. But one of the things they're missing in that is that if you're spending tens of billions on data centers and you can increase the efficiency, some of these engineers can increase the efficiency 3x. That is serious leverage.
It all comes down to the end of Office Space where you save the pennies.
Right.
It's just a bigger, oh my gosh. It's just at scale. It's all space at scale.
That movie was made in Austin.
There you go.
It was one of the original. So going back to your AI newsletter, because I want to make sure people really understand, you're by far and away like one of my favorite follows on LinkedIn. It's you for me, Ethan Mullick, who is at the Wharton School and was actually the keynote at my 25th anniversary last year. Our youngest daughter, like, literally went up to Ethan Mullick afterwards and was like, "Can I just skip this high school stuff and just go straight here?" And she's right actually to think that way because of how fast this exponential curve
Yeah.
is rising. But anyways, that didn't happen. She's in high school right now, but she's spending a lot of time on AI and robotics. So, and the other is actually Morgan Linton, who I'm going to have him on the podcast too. He's the co-founder of this company, Bold Metrics, that Deborah and I have been investors in since the beginning, but he takes a much more AI engineering approach. So, like, just take us back to the beginning of this newsletter, because your staying power here is like incredible. I think it's 35,000 links and counting. I mean, I don't know another human being on earth that has chronicled it to that extent. And just take us back to the beginning of that.
So I think, you have to play to your strengths.
All right.
I used to be very self-conscious that I was a little much, but I'm now leaning into it.
Good, good. Yeah.
All it takes is doing something consistently to do pretty great things. And so I've always been an extreme person. And so whether, unfortunately with toxic ideas like drinking, that was a challenge because it doesn't matter what's in the fridge, I'm drinking 6 of it. So, that idea was a bad piece of my obsessiveness. But I don't know if you remember a website called Delicious,
Oh yeah, I do.
the bookmarking site.
Yeah. I've forgotten about that.
I've always been I'm almost like a strange hoarder of information.
Yeah.
So back in the day, I don't know if this was the 90s still or perhaps early 2000s, but Delicious was the place you would go to bookmark stuff.
Yeah.
And this is back during XML and RSS feeds. And before these walled gardens like Facebook, you could aggregate and compile information and then share it.
Yeah.
And Dave Weiner was a big influence with OPML for me and RSS XML.
Yeah.
And
I think he was one of the authors of the Clue Train Manifesto.
yeah,
If I'm not
comes all full
mistaken.
circle.
Yeah.
So I did not realize it at the time, but just by the nature of being myself, one day I got a message from the head of Delicious, and he was like, you are insane. You've got more links than anybody on this platform.
Right.
I don't know how you physically do it.
All right.
You clearly love the internet in your free time, and you have thousands and thousands of links. And so he brought me into Yahoo because Yahoo acquired them
Right.
right around the same time as Flickr. So I got to see Katerina Fake. And I mean, this is like, for me, I
Wow.
might as well be meeting like
All right.
a football star.
Right.
But
Sure.
so going to Yahoo's headquarters was really exciting. And I was the top user of Delicious. And so I realized, okay, I'm a little obsessive. So this is what I tapped into when it
Right.
came to AI. So when I saw GPT, I just decided I am going to, without even realizing the symmetry of my Delicious behavior,
Right. Right.
I started organizing links for myself.
Yes.
And so this has never been to publish a blog. I don't care if anybody ever reads it. It's just, I want to know more
Right.
than anyone else in the room. I may not
Right.
be the smartest in the room, but if you bring up retrieval augmented generation
Right.
or cohere or embodiment, whatever it is, I
Yep.
want to know what we're talking about.
Right.
And so starting right after GPT came out in December, I started just manually reading everything I could and then organizing it privately.
Right. Right.
And then in September, which is several months later,
Mm-hmm.
I gave a speech to the National Association of Broadcasters. And that was when I decided I'm going to be the weirdo in the room.
Right.
Because everyone thinks of AI, even now, as like a language bot.
Right.
But I was like, no, there's this thing called multimodality where it's going to be able to also think and talk in sound waves natively, or possibly, through understanding of pictures and context of what's in a room,
Right.
and be able to understand things. And then long term, these things, just like the Apple Newton was too early, we're at the Newton stage.
Right.
But there's going to be a Kindle and an iPad where all these parts come together and you're going to get robots that you can talk to.
Right.
Because the natural language is an interface. It's not the language is not the product. The language is the first step.
Right.
So it's a chit chat bot that can then, if you give it agency, can do really cool things.
Right.
So I decided at that presentation with the National Association of Broadcasters that would be my opportunity to publish something with a roadmap.
Right.
And I was like, well, I got to put it somewhere. And then I realized, kind of like, there's the joke, pictures or it didn't happen.
Right.
I'm like, I don't want to just be singing in my shower at home about AI. You have to be braver than that.
Right. Right.
So I bought a domain.
Yeah.
I got a WordPress account, and it was taking me more hours than there are in the week to publish each week.
Right.
So I think it was like 80 hours
Right.
per week.
A problem. Right. Right.
So I ended up being backlogged by, I think I was 4 months behind.
Right.
And I really wanted to quit. I was embarrassed because here I am like, here's the latest about AI, Brett.
Right.
And it's 4 months old.
4 months old. Right. Right.
But I was doing it because I'm obsessive. I was doing it in 7-day blocks.
Right.
And I was like, look, if I just chip away at this, I'll have an archive of every week.
Right.
In as like a history of this moment.
Yeah.
And so from there, I was like, well, this is a good opportunity to force myself. If everyone says AI is a productivity booster,
Mm-hmm.
maybe I should use it.
Right.
So I went from using Word docs and Google Docs and copy and pasting. I actually got carpal tunnel. I used AI to write Python scripts.
Right.
And I used them to I made a Chrome extension, which was probably the coolest moment for me when I used to read, I think it was 600 clicks of my finger to
Right.
open all these tweets and then copy and paste their title and their description and the URL into my blog.
Right.
And I made a Chrome extension that I could just hit the button.
Yeah.
I would just suck them all up.
Right.
And then I had to read them all, but at least I wasn't copy and pasting 700 times and getting repetitive stress injuries.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I just kept doing it and kept doing it
Right.
like Forrest Gump.
Right.
I've always been I like to run far. I used to run like 35 miles.
Yeah.
And you don't realize what you're doing until it's past. So one day I looked and I was like, wow, I'm at like 20,000 links that I've hand organized.
Yeah.
And now I think I'm just shy of 36,000 hand organized links. And I use a CSV now. So I just have a CSV with 45 categories.
Yeah.
And I take all the headlines and I do still click on them all.
Mhm.
And I put them into the categories, and it's everything from retrieval augmented generation to Quen to could be embodied robotics or XAI or autonomous vehicles.
Right.
And then I have a Python script, thankfully, that takes that CSV and just publishes it for me.
Wow. Wow.
Like I've been doing that now. It's been 96 weeks.
Wow. That's incredible.
And I think the thing I would say for the viewers is I'm always been self-conscious that
Yeah.
I'm an English major.
Right.
I'm not a technologist. I don't code. And thankfully, I've got friends who are coders
Right.
who gave me the confidence boost to say, no, you have a really cool spidey sense now
Right.
because you're wide. Not everyone, most people are specialists.
Right.
And by having a wide view, it gives me a more holistic idea of what's happening.
Well, actually, it's a great example of the fact that you have the power of some of the best coders now with AI. Right.
Cheating a little bit, but yes, I can.
No,
I have
no, it's
that-
not cheating. It's actually been the arc of all human history, starting with the discovery of fire, that we should use technology to create easier and more successful lives.
I should mention, because you mentioned I'm a good dad. I do this. Sometimes life works out. So both of my daughters are competitive dancers, and they dance every day, 6 days a week until about 9 or 10 p.m. So I'm a bachelor, and my wife is with them at the dance studio. So
Right.
I'm alone all day anyway.
Right.
So after work, I work out, I go to the gym, try to not become a
Yeah.
couch potato, and then all my other
And
free
then work
time,
on this.
I'm doing
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. Okay. So with the AI newsletter, there's very few human beings on Earth that I could ask this question of, that have like really charted it since the beginning of ChatGPT, almost 36,000 links, right? And also, you are extremely intelligent. I've always thought that about you. And so what are the 5 to 10 biggest standout moments where you're like, okay, this really changes everything?
So the first one that is pretty popular would be agents.
Yeah.
And that was something that I felt intuitively was coming. And it made me very happy to know I was on the right track when agents became the buzzword. So agents for sure. I don't want to dismiss the obvious because that's great, but that is really where the language model is no longer riffing or hallucinating. It's got chain of thought. It has reasoning, and
Right.
you can ask it to do a task, and then it will go do something for you and bring it back. So
Right.
it really was the beginning of the language model as translator.
Yeah.
So I could ask it something in plain English, and then it would go execute and come back, as opposed to in the context window just predicting the next token.
Right.
So that agency was that's a big difference
Yeah.
than a BS artist that's just predicting tokens. Agency was a big one. And then
And we're still at the very beginning of agent.
total
I mean,
beginning.
very beginning. I mean, it's, Sequoia Capital last year, it kind of went under the radar, but when the '01 model came out, that was when they put out a research report, as Pat Grady and a few other people at Sequoia to put this out, where they announced it in this white paper as a $10 trillion opportunity, because people don't realize like how big the software market is, but more importantly, how big the services market is. And now you actually see these frontier models going into services.
Ethan Mollick, I think, who's one of my favorites, said something like, even if we stopped now,
Right.
it's going to take a decade to even realize what we've done.
Right.
And so there's one, I believe it's Simple, and I think they're getsimple.ai. I hope I didn't mess that up. But they're I think Y Combinator.
Hmm.
But they were an example of a turnkey plug and play agent for consumers to delegate phone calls to get a reservation or do mundane tasks like wait to call your hotel and just
Right.
basically stick it to the man with your
Yeah.
own version of you hold for me type thing.
Yeah.
And so that was a very interesting evolution. I think Yelp then came out with the version where small businesses can then reply. So the idea that, my agent calls your agent
Right.
is very powerful.
Right. Right.
Then I think more so than agents, embodied robots have
Yes.
been
Yep.
the
Yep.
thing that consumes me. Your audience is probably more open to that topic than perhaps a layperson.
Yeah.
But that is where I focus on,
Yes.
is what's happening with embodied robots. And that's where the convergence of all these things that I've been seeing through my newsletter really start to run together. And that's been the most fun thing to watch. So before I learned about embodied robots, there was a guy, I believe his name is Bilawal, and he started talking about AR,
Mhm.
which is a total pivot
Right.
from language models,
Right.
because you think of that being virtual.
That's right.
And so artificial, or augmented reality, and in particular, he talked about neural radiance fields and something called Gaussian splatting. And I remember Gaussian filters as a kid with blurs in Photoshop, if you're an old school Photoshop nerd.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And what became super clear to me was just how much everything is connected with all of these seemingly separate products.
Right.
So for example, Gaussian, I think it's Gauss, I think his name is Gauss, but Gaussian blurs were something you could apply in Photoshop to add noise.
Right.
So if you wanted to make it more, more interesting, you could blur a photo.
Yeah.
And when I learned about diffusion models, I found out that the way diffusion models were trained, this was denoising. So you would train a model on 1,000 pictures of a cat, just one thing, and then you'd add some noise, and you'd say, "What do you think this is?" And it would denoise.
Right.
So this very simple concept of denoising, they just kept adding noise. So you've got easy to pick out a cat if it's 10% noise. Then they add 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. And whoever thought of this, we got to Google this person. Somebody had the aha moment to say, what if we just give it all noise
Right.
and say, what if this was a cat?
Right.
And then you just denoise this random static and it's a cat.
Right.
And then because of that, you could have more than one object that would never appear in real life, like a cat riding a shark on top of a tank.
Right.
And you just give it random noise and it denoises it into this magical concept.
Right.
And so demystifying what is pretty mysterious concept of image diffusion,
Right.
and then realizing it's Gaussian splatting,
Right.
and then realizing there are these, that's not Gaussian splatting, but then there's these other things like Gaussian splatting where you're, for people who don't know, that's where you can stitch together images and then diffuse what's missing.
Right.
And it's a very different technology, right? So that's why, as you can tell, I get excited. CGI has been around forever,
Mhm.
right? So like replacing people's jobs with CGI orcs has already happened.
Right.
So Lord of the Rings, there's not a million extras.
Right.
There's CGI.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now if it's diffused extra,
You just invoked my favorite movies of all time.
different types of ethics, right? I understand
Yeah.
the ethics of it all. But taking the ethics aside and just thinking about how this stuff works, just like CGI is a different technology, Gaussian splatting is one. There's also something, there's a very cool company called Live Portrait that I think is from ByteDance. And they were basically mapping behaviors onto stick figures. So basically you could face swap. So your face
Right.
is now on me.
Right.
And this idea of, I believe it's called latent consistency, where you take an image and then map something on top of it.
Right.
That's AI, but it's very different than chatbots.
Right. Right.
So to kind of recap, hearing about how diffusion works
Mm-hmm.
and knowing that it's separate, but it's coming together.
Right.
So you just ask your chatbot, hey, make me a cat surfing on top of a shark riding a tank. I use plain English, no Photoshop. It then sends it to the diffusion model and the prompt turns into my image. Same thing then where now I can swap myself to be you. And then all of a sudden you get a guy named Jim Fan. And he was the one he works at NVIDIA.
Right.
And he's in charge of their robotics lab. And he started talking about training embodied robots in simulation.
Right.
So now you're thinking, okay, artificial, augmented reality, virtual reality, things that you don't necessarily think of as being applicable to the real world
Right.
are being used as proxies for physics models. And Jim Fan, if you haven't seen it, you need to Google it. They trained a robot.
And I learned about him from you. And his talks are extraordinary.
He's the man. If I had to say, like, you have a few people in your brain where you're just like, anything that guy says,
Right.
I co-sign, sight unseen.
Well, and NVIDIA is now worth over $4 trillion, the most valuable company in the world. So I'm sure that Jim Fan is like one of the key people at NVIDIA that makes the company worth that.
He also, in the spirit of your podcast, strikes me as incredibly authentic and kind.
Yes.
A lot of his
Agreed.
tweets are congratulating his coworkers for their new job.
Agreed.
He shares other people's research.
Yeah.
He's a very authentic guy.
Yeah, actually, just as a quick aside, because, there's a lot of leaders that will watch this podcast. One of the key things you can tell on whether or not a leader is a truly like good person, like really cares about their employees, is how much they talk about themselves versus the rest of the team.
Right.
And I am for sure a product of many, many, many people who chose to go on the journey with me, whether it's you as a customer back in the day, or whether it's, my co-founders or people. And, I really pay attention to that. And there's certain, very high profile leaders in the world where they use I all the time. And it really shows you, it's a window into how they think, that they really think they're the one on the hero's journey. And everybody else kind of is like just there to support them. And it's just not the case. Like societies are created by people coming together.
What to me is the internet would say that
companies are little societies.
That's a red flag, as the internet would say.
Right, it is a red flag. Yeah.
So Jim is all green flags.
Yes.
But the thing that really woke me up with Jim and Embodied Robots was he trained a dog in simulation it was a robot dog, like one of those, Boston Dynamics type dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And he trained it to walk on a yoga ball using only simulated training.
Yeah.
And so he basically, I think, I hope no one quotes me if I'm wrong, but my impression was essentially, and if I do this right, you'll get that spark. He trained it in, let's say 20,000 simulations.
Yeah.
Where each simulation had different physics.
Right.
And that was one of the fun things he did, is he changed gravity, he changed the vectors, whatever it is, just gave this dog, and the dog would train through reinforcement learning until it could walk on a ball.
Yeah.
And now, much like humans, where our brains are in our skulls and they've never seen the light of day, this dog is in a simulation, has never seen the real world.
Right.
And then one day, he gave it the 20,000th and one simulation, which wasn't simulation. It was real life.
Right.
And so we were just that +1 world, and the dog walked on a ball.
Right. Right.
And so when I saw that, I was like, okay, this is science fiction.
And this actually is the bull case for NVIDIA, because, that DeepSeek moment that I was mentioning earlier, like the week after President Trump announced, NVIDIA lost 600 billion a market cap, and the NASDAQ lost $1 trillion a market cap because people thought this is kind of game over. You can just steal the weights. But the bull case for NVIDIA is that there's going to be NVIDIA chips in every robot.
They've got the supply. I think they're not go I would wonder, this is where the free market and the dynamics work, because they have customers.
All right.
You can't get rid of your customers, right? You need them for revenue too.
All right.
But on the other hand, they're releasing open source models.
I know.
They're incredibly open.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, conversely, or in addition, you've got Amazon making models.
That's right.
And so, that's been
And
something-
actually, OpenAI is now releasing open source as well.
So I think NVIDIA,
Like finally.
so yeah, that sort of thing. So as if you ask me just what I've noticed, I think, diffusion, the idea of agents,
Yeah.
embodied robots, multimodality, context understanding. There was a very famous example from 2023 or maybe early 2024 where they gave GPT, actually, I believe, sorry, it was Google. They gave Google a picture, and it's a famous picture of Obama in a locker room.
Right.
And he's got his foot on the scale and someone's weighing himself. And obviously Obama's messing with him because he's got his foot on the scale. And they asked the AI, what's happening in this picture?
Right.
And they asked how many mirrors are in this photo? What is the man doing? And it was able to say the context.
Right.
This man is putting his foot on the scale. Why is he doing that? He's trying to probably play a trick on this other guy.
Right.
And so that idea, I believe, is called theory of mind,
Mhm.
where you can
Yes.
understand emotional context in addition to just objects.
Right.
The ability for computers, and again, I feel like if it wasn't your audience, I would be shy to say this, but I believe it's been pretty clearly benchmarked that the top of the line frontier models can beat most humans at things we think are exclusively human traits.
Yeah. And that is true. And that is with less than 1,000 days since the launch of ChatGPT. Okay. So people really need to mark this moment in time that humanity, again, has never prioritized anything with the amount of money, intensity, and just labor, as this. And, that's coming back to Chad, because I want to come back to that for a moment to make this really practical for people in terms of all these mind-blowing moments you've experienced and I've experienced, in part through you, thanks to your newsletter, which is a must follow, is that robots are the physical manifestation of AI. And Chad, what they really need more than AI right now is they need robots. They need armies of robots to go in there and build the pipelining for the electrical supply they need, for the clean water supply they need, for the energy projects they need, for the vaccines they need, for the healthcare robots that'll help, cure cleft palate and all of the other diseases that plague a country like that, which largely is just not even thought about by Americans. I mean, when that Uber driver picked me up at 4:30 in the morning on the way to MIT to give that talk that, I shared with you, about the hard problem of consciousness in the accelerating age of AI, quantum computing, and robotics. Like, I was kind of embarrassed. I knew nothing about his country. And so and he was such an awesome guy. And so I just started immediately using ChatGPT to learn as we talked, and I was asking him questions, and, he's saving up for the next 6 to 7 years to move his family to America. But what a beautiful world it would be if Chad could actually be the oasis that he actually is happy to be in. I mean, I love America, but what if Chad could also be the oasis?
So I have a question, sort of a rhetorical question for me and you.
Yeah.
As far as the dual, there's a huge split.
Yeah.
Because when I'm in the weeds and I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, I'm reading, it's about 600 a week that I read now, these headlines.
All right.
So, there's a great concept from Stephen Johnson's book, Where Good Ideas Come From.
Oh, yeah. I love Stephen Johnson.
The first chapter is about the adjacent possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can only bring you one concept at a time.
Right.
So if you talk about multi-channel attribution and I don't know what that is, you got to tell me a lot and walk me there and bring me to you.
Right.
And so with AI, because I'm so far into it,
Yeah.
my adjacent possible, I feel alone most of the time.
Right.
Because most of the people I talk to are not as into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so this past newsletter, I was reading a stat that said 2/3 of Americans have not even used it.
Right.
And I think back to COVID and the conflicts with masks and vaccines and,
Right.
even with AI, there are valid criticisms of the resource usage or the
Yep.
training data. And so often I have to split my brain into two pieces where on
Right.
one hand, I'm talking about like, look, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it can find cancer 5 years earlier. And it's hard to tell, if I could get a mammogram that would know cancer 5 years early, I'm going to take it.
Right.
So there's this
That's right.
tremendous pressure
Yep.
for things that very few people would say, well, I'm not going to use mammogram AI because it's unethical. I think most people would just say, yeah, I want to not die.
Exactly.
But then on the other hand, there's probably a large disconnect between early adopters.
Right.
And I'd love your thoughts about, do you think are people, you see what happens with the Waymo vandals and different things,
Right.
would AI, not only does humanity have a chance, but do you think we're just going to like kill it, and rebel before it has a chance
Well,
to show what it can do?
I think if we did, first of all, I think the answer is no, we're not going to just kill AI. But I think if we did, that would mean that fear won.
Hmm.
And if fear wins, it's game over for humanity. Because if fear wins, we already, like if you were an alien that came to planet Earth right now and you knew nothing about us at all, and you looked at the weaponry that we have with nuclear weapons alone, you would be like, okay, this species has created enough nuclear weapons to destroy the planet many times over. And by the way, they're still building them today. Like you would be like, okay, this is insanity, right? And, two things can be true at the same time. We could be both insane to do that. And it's really just a handful of human beings that are making the decision to do that. I don't think 8.2 billion humans would collectively make the decision to do that. We're talking about maybe 1,000 to 2,000 human beings, which pretty much rule the rest of us. I mean, whether or not we want to call it rule, like in some countries, like Putin really is ruling, Kim Jong-un really is ruling. In our country, it is a democracy, but there's various aspects, various opinions on that. So, fear is the biggest problem. And one of the things I'm being very clear-eyed in my book about is there's a book called The Alchemist, which I love. And there's a line in The Alchemist where it says, it's always darkest before the dawn. And that line I can't tell you how many times that line rings through my head. And I do think for humanity that it will be dark and we'll be able to peer over the frontier, almost like you're peering past the earth on the edge of the curvature and you're seeing the moon. And you're like, the moon, that's abundance, right? And that we'll be able to peer over that at some point collectively for humanity. And we have the free will to make the choice at that point. Do we want to become the species in the universe that allowed love to conquer fear? And then in an exponential curve that'll only get more exponential if we collectively wake up and collectively we've decided to really embrace the divinity in each other, the fact that we're almost genetically identical. I mean, you take a, 7-foot tall black, basketball player and you take a 4-foot tall Chinese monk, and genetically they're almost exactly identical. I mean, it's like to 99.999 just keeps going. And if you take that collective wake up, then at that point, I think humanity is only bounded by the laws of physics, most of which we don't actually know, and quantum physics gets really weird really fast. And I actually think in that branch of the universe, if you will, that we will solve things like faster and light speed travel. And, part of the pushback I get, it's kind of funny because like even in a optimistic age of abundance for all scenario, people are like, well, Brett, what are people going to do on planet Earth? Is it just going to be like people meditating, et cetera? And I'm like, look, there are going to be people on Earth that measure the world in terms of gross domestic happiness as opposed to GDP. But there's going to be other people like me that are like super ambitious. And my sense of you is you're also ambitious. And like, if I can say, Ethan, hey, let's go and go check out this quasar, or, let's go to the edge of a black hole, not close enough to get sucked in, or let's go to another planet, restart life on that planet, or maybe start life on that planet for the first time. Those sound like really fun. I mean, that's the Star Trek future, right? And I think that we'll have that possibility, because the exponential curve we're in, I mean, you really understand this, but it's far more exponential than people can grasp. The only way, I mean, I love your opinion on this. The only way I can kind of grok it is a week of tech development to me, partially like buffeted by your newsletter, to me feels like a year of tech progress 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, what's it going to feel like 10 years from now? Is an hour going to feel like a week today, which feels like a year 10 years ago? I mean, that's what exponential means.
Well, one large harbinger of change that got my attention was I have a friend who's a world-class programmer, and he's in that edge case of people that AI was not good enough to help it. And he is does medium frequency trading and stat arb, finance quant type stuff. And he just couldn't find a use case for AI given just what he was up to and his proprietary models and all these things. And one day, probably 2 months ago, 3 months ago, after Claude released their latest version in the command line, he texted me and said, okay, I think he had some cursing in there. It was like, holy crap, this is it. And his productivity in the command line, he's like, I can't stop. I'm so addicted. I'm just running command. I've got multiple computers, multiple servers.
All right.
They're able to do PhD level work, like legit stat PhD level work. For him, again, the thing that always freaks me out is when the money lines up with the passion, because this is not a guy who would just do this for fun like me. Like, hey, I made a Chrome extension.
Right.
He's like, no, I'm making a lot of money faster and easier than I would with a PhD.
Right.
And so that was a huge wake-up call.
Right.
I don't know did you ever read Why the Future Doesn't Need Us by Bill Joy from 2020?
I did. That was a very dystopian article, but yes, I read it. Yeah.
That was one of the
That ran the circuits. That was kind of like viral before viral.
Scared the crap out of me.
Yeah.
Especially for those who didn't read it. Why, as a spoiler alert, if you want to read it, stop.
Yeah.
But
yeah, Why the Future Doesn't Need Us by Bill Joy.
Why the Future Doesn't Need Us by Bill Joy. He tricks you, and you read the first introduction, and it's so amazing. And then he says that was the Unabomber manifesto.
Oh, no.
So I remember reading this thing thinking,
oh, I forgot about that part. Yeah.
And then you're like, holy crap, it's the Unabomber.
Right, right.
But one of the things he did not say explicitly, but it's something I picked up from, and I use this as a rhetorical challenge of how do you get off the train?
Right.
And this is going to come back to fear versus love. Try to buy an orange without scanning it into a computer.
Yeah.
Like everything has a code on it. Like
Right.
it's hard.
Right.
You can use cash maybe in Delmarva, there's some places, but if you try to buy an orange, most places, beep,
Right.
you've told the POS system to buy another orange.
Right.
And I go to work and there's a good we basically commute to our computers to do data entry.
All right.
And so Max Tegmark, who's I think he's Swedish, he's a big AI researcher. He was talking about how hard it's going to be to pause.
Yeah, he's written a number of books and given lots of TED Talks.
And that concept to me is sort of where you can't stop, because whether you want to like it or not, the train's going.
Right.
And that goes back to Bill Joy, which is you can't get off this train.
Right.
Because if I don't do it, you will. If Sam doesn't do Stargate, China will.
Right.
So humanity in itself, going back to the Bay of Pigs, it is a prisoner's dilemma, and it is going to happen. Someone's going to build the data center, whether it's Elon or whoever you're rooting for at the moment. And so the best bet you can do, and this is what motivates me to know as much as humanly possible, is I never think of myself as an AI evangelist. I want to make it.
Right, right.
And so if you ask me, what am I doing to make sure love wins?
Right.
Is I want to be the most informed person at all times.
Right.
So that when the opportunities come, I can explain the best I can to someone who hasn't had 25 hours a week spare time.
Right.
And try to be aware of this idea that the only choice is to be optimistic and have love, because you can't stop the train. It is like the trolley problem.
Right, right.
And
that is, in fact, what you are doing too. Outside of the newsletter, you are speaking on this, and I'm quite sure you're one of the best speakers in the world on this right now, because again, how many people have that type of knowledge that they've done that amount of labor to really chart the progress, and then also have the brain you do going back to the beginning of the internet revolution.
Well, it's nice to have a quantitative metric like 36,000 links, because
Right.
everyone's an AI expert right now. And that's like my fear. I don't like posting. When I post to LinkedIn and things,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm
And
not
actually, I would disagree with
Bengali,
you.
you know.
I think very few are AI experts right now. I think a lot of people want to be an AI expert, but would not put in the amount of work.
So I figure you
And
can't shortcut the work.
you can't that's true of everything. I mean, that's true of if you're trying to change your physical body, or you're trying to change your diet, or you're trying to actually change, something like a relationship. I mean,
Mhm.
you've got to put in the work. It takes a lot of reps
Right.
to make yourself better at anything. And that's very much true about entrepreneurship. I've always said entrepreneurship is an art of grit and luck. And I always say, look, on the grit side, there's a lot of people in America working multiple manual labor jobs. So it's not just grit. Luck actually does play a role, being at the right place at the
Mhm.
right time, being able to forecast the future or manifest that future, and then you're on the right curve. I mean, that's really the reason I'm actually here as an entrepreneur, is that I've been on the right part of that curve. Sometimes been a little bit too early, sometimes I've been a little bit too late, but I've always been somewhere on the right part of that curve.
Well, I think the moral of the story, no matter what topic it is you should never be embarrassed to be obsessed.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
if you want to be the best you can be, you have to be a little weird. And I tucked my personality in my entire life. And so this is the chapter where I'm gonna let it fly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Awesome. Well, it's good to have you out there. I mean, you're adding a lot of light and love into this world.
Well, thank you for including
And
me in your faith in people.
yeah, absolutely. Well, cool. This is a lot of fun. I really, really appreciate our friendship, and it's one I really cherish. And maybe we'll do this again in the future and get into other topics. I mean, I'm pretty sure, a year from now it'll be, I don't know, 50,000 links or
We'll
something and
see.
counting. I mean, it's only getting more exponential, so it's going to be harder to keep up. But
Bro,
you have the
second
machine.
Andrews, ironically, my weekly number is going up.
Yeah, and you do have the machines to help you keep up.
Well, I hope everyone in your audience can find a Brett, because it's really special. I appreciate
Well,
you.
thanks, man. I appreciate it. Awesome, buddy. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in to Love Conquers Fear. I absolutely loved this episode. Ethan and I are about to go out on this beautiful boat in this incredible weather out here. Feel really lucky to be with him here and to have a friend that has meant a lot to me for, gosh, decades now, and someone that I can really jam on all these topics with. Stay tuned for more episodes. I have a number of just incredible investors, entrepreneurs, scientists, spiritual teachers lined up, and so it's going to be a blast. And I'm loving this, and I hope you're loving this, and we'll learn together and hopefully inspire each other. Thanks again, everybody.